And Dr. Jerry Johnston has done a lot of work on this topic, not only because he is a specialist in terms of speaking to young people, but also because of his own personal life story. And when I did a little setup interview, I think it was last week, Jerry, if I'm not mistaken, we talked a little bit about it, but just to kind of review, you have had your own battle with suicidal impulse when you were a teenager.
Yeah, you know, that's what gives me such hope about what Crossroads is doing. You know, we look at the statistics and we could get quite depressed unless we realize that we have the life-changing message of Jesus. And what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks and through this book is that Crossroads is going to give the same hope to people who are just like me. And eternities are going to be changed. Families that, instead of having an infliction story, are going to be able to say what my dad does when he sits on the back row and hears me preach. He weeps. But I was in the typical suburbia family. My mom was an alcoholic. My dad was a national sales director. And camouflaged behind suburbia affluence was a very lost family. And I got involved in the drug scene. Ended up finally quite ill and called my dad. I gave all the warning signs up into that moment. And it's crucial that if people don't know the warning signs, Amanda gave those warning signs more than once. And what we have to do is give literacy to parents and grandparents on how to actually read the signs and then carefully intervene.
Well, chapter 2 of the book is entitled Warning Signs, and I think you've got, what, about 12 warning signs, if I'm not mistaken. I think maybe we need to almost do part 1 and it's 11 actually, part 1 and part 2 this hour, and we'll do half of them now and half of them later. But the first warning sign that you mentioned here is withdrawal. You talk about a teenager who pulls away. Is this something that always happens, this withdrawal?
You know, the pendulum is in extremes. A formerly introverted kid can become gregarious, outgrowing. I'm going to live it up, I'm going to die soon. Vice versa. A student who literally stops talking, or they cocoon themselves in the abuse of drugs or alcohol or some kind of subculture movement. When a student's withdrawing in any way, someone has to step in. You know, we went to a city in the United States that is the #1 place to raise a family, the hundreds of churches, and it has the #2 suicide rate. The U.S. is #3, Canada #2. And the parents that we'll hear in these next few days, they will all say postscript, I wish I would have done this. I wish I would have done that. I'm grateful that we're going to be able to help parents actually see those withdrawing and then to know what to do.
I would think that most parents, when they see their kids withdrawing, would say, well, he's a little moody lately, he's going through a bad time, maybe he's having trouble with his girlfriend, you know. Wouldn't there not be a tendency to just kind of downplay this withdrawal? You know,
we would initially think that. And there are times, obviously, as a teenager develops, so there's all kinds of mood changes. But you know, in the case of Amanda, this was a withdrawal. This was a cocooning that was going to eventually result in a self-inflicted death. Every suicide is preventable, every single one. You know, I abuse drugs, but I finally made the phone call. You know, suicidologists call these cries for help. It's a child or a parent. They don't want to die, but they don't want to live in the agony and the hopelessness they're in. And so they're depending upon someone. And no one should be closer to be an interventionist than a parent. Sometimes that surrogate grandparent has to step in because they are raising kids. We know that demographically across North America. But this is where the faith community comes in. We were at Dalhousie University with Stan Kuchar on Monday, and I asked him that, what I would call $64,000 question. How do we bring faith and science together? Because we've got to teach mental health. We know depression has skyrocketed in North American culture, but there's a faith component to this. When Jesus said that he came to set the captives free, we know what that means. And Jim, there is a whole spiritual dimension to this that I hope and pray that we will talk about and we will ask God to break the bondage that is in the lives of people.
Well, yeah, and I would think that that would be very apropos when we're talking about depression, which is number 3 symptom. But number 2 symptom, and we've kind of alluded to it already, is moodiness. The teen who's up and down. Now, okay, as a parent, how do you differentiate between, you know, kids are walking hormones. You know, I mean, they're up one day, they're down another. You know, it can be the smallest thing that puts them off. How do you differentiate between the everyday moodiness of the teenager and the kind of moodiness you're talking about?
Suicidal ideation actually causes a student to have a preoccupation with death and death themes. The moodiness we're referring to is beyond, you know, Joey dumped me or I failed my math exam. We're talking about a kid who is gestating in their depression, and they are beginning to think logically about a plan or a method to extinguish themselves. You know, after years of sitting with all kinds of suicides, I've seen, you know, probably not everyone, but a lot. The key of this book is the intervention. How do you intervene? Because I know our audience today, there is probably not one family listening today that does not have someone in their immediate or extended family who is suicidal. And they have to know. And that's what is so dynamic about what Crossroads is doing. God is allowing this ministry to bring hope. And I can't think of a more nobler mission than to reach out to the precious young people of our culture.
You know, we're getting close to the end of this interview, and we're going to be continuing this in the next half hour of the program, because I want to take as much time as we can on the third sign, which is depression, and we have to give it full opportunity for expression. But friends, this book is called Why They Die, Curing the Death Wish in Our Kids, written by Dr. Jerry Johnston. It is a book that is intriguing, first of all, and it's informative, it's educational. And when I read it, I was telling Jerry, I sat down and read it and read it and read it and didn't stop till I'd read it. I read the whole thing. I found it absolutely fascinating. And I'm someone who's been working with people in various crises, you know, for 42 years. I found the book absolutely challenging and very informative. Now for you, if you're a dad or a mom or a grandparent, and you've got precious young teenagers,
right,
you know, that you love with all your heart, man, you've got hopes and dreams for them. And you see what's happening out there in youth culture. You know they're on the internet. You know that there's this cyberbullying going on. You know that there are other factors that are contributing negatively to their lives. You need to be informed. You need to be on the ball in terms of intervention, as Jerry said. So that's why this book is so important. It's called Why They Die, Curing the Death Wish in Our Kids. And you can call 1-888-288-0003 to get your copy. And remember when you do, to send your very, very best and heartfelt gifts to make this happen. It's unusual for a television ministry to take on such a heavy topic, but it's absolutely relevant, it's absolutely timely, and it's something we all need to be a part of.